Hello all, this session is going to be about revenue and income. Clearly you can't look at these items in isolation, you need to be aware of costs as well, but you've been looking at those in another module. Have those in mind when I'm talking about where the money's coming in as well. So it's really important in any business that you generate income, and this will need planning. It's probably not as easy as you might think, and it's what will make or break your business. No matter how well you control your costs, if you don't actually have reliable and plannable revenue streams coming in, then your business will struggle. So planning is a critical fact, and always make sure that you align it to your costs. So as I said earlier on, when you're thinking this one through, also have in your mind not only what costs occur, but when they occur as well, because trying to actually align costs to income is going to be very important in terms of generating your cash flows, and it will give you an indication as to perhaps when you might need to borrow money in short term to fill a hole. It's also very likely in any enterprise, but especially a social enterprise, that you won't just have one income stream. Clearly one may well be more important than others, but you're highly likely to have multiple income streams. And this is a really good thing because it spreads risk and also increases your opportunities to generate different sources of income and engage with other people as well. But it also adds to the complexity of managing your income. And one of the points of this session is really to make clear to you that think about what income's coming in, when it's coming in, how it's coming in, and then what you have to do with this in order to make your business run properly. Costs always come in at different times. I think one of the things that may well be useful in a social enterprise is that much of your income will come in cash or fairly instant terms. You won't have to wait a long time to receive it. One of the problems that many businesses have is that when they sell something, it can take 30, 60 or even 90 days to get the income in. And that clearly creates a big cash flow problem because your costs are probably running in front of when the income arrives. I think in your social enterprise, it's likely that actually the events you run will generate cash on the day, and it will be less of a problem managing when the money comes in. However, what is important is you are aware that it is important to see when money comes in and whether it does align with money going out, so that if there are any tensions or challenges, you can deal with them. It can be very useful just to create a very simple spreadsheet, as I've drawn up above, that actually on the rows downwards you can just put your various sources of income, so donations, events, sales, gifts. We're going to talk about all of these as we go through this session, and then running across the months how much money you expect to come in each form. I've done it in months, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with you doing it in weeks, or even within weeks, sometimes in days. That's for you to decide. In terms of useful information though, I think most of your accounts will work on a monthly basis. So at some point, even if you work in smaller increments, you'll probably end up having to aggregate it up so that you've got monthly amounts to work with. Just to say as well, over a period of time, you can then of course 1 year on the next compare how 1 month did this time with how it did last time or 2 years ago or whatever. So you can start then to look at trends, improvements, how things change, and what messages that might send to you about what alterations or changes that you might need to make in terms of the way that you do generate your income. One of the key sources of income for most social enterprises are donations. And with all of the terms that I'm going to go through now, I'm going to ask a really fundamental question before we look at each one, and that is, what is? So what is a donation? It sounds a very obvious thing, but actually it isn't. Donations in the UK, for example, can be topped up with tax-back payments of 25%. So if you can actually get information on that, not only do you get the money that's given to you, so if £100 given to you, but when you claim the tax back on that £100, it ends up as £125. Many countries have these subtle nuances of support to go with donations, so that's one of the things to look into. But basically, a donation is something that's given to you by somebody for whatever reason motivates them. You need to understand what motivates your donors as well, because many of your tactics of engaging with donors, of choosing which ones to engage with, of what you can offer to encourage them, depends upon you understanding what it is that motivates them to want to help you. That's going to be a really important part, not just of recruiting new donors, but also retaining old ones. And I often think that we put a lot of effort into trying to recruit new donors all the time, when actually it might be more appropriate to spend a bit more time thinking about how we retain and how we encourage existing donors who have clearly shown an interest in what you're doing to actually repeat their donations. You've got to think through about how you're going to identify potential donors. It might be through your own knowledge. It might be through people you've met at networking events. It might be through web searches that you've done on potential organisations that could support you. There's lots of different ways of targeting donors. And again, there are many tactics involved. Don't just think they'll come to you. You've actually actively got to go out to find the donors and then engage with them and persuade them and advocate to them that what you're doing is worth their time, effort, money to actually be involved with. Ask yourself the question, are you going to look for one-off donations? Somebody gives you something just once, or would you like regular recurrent contributions? So somebody might, for example, put some money into a tin on a one-off basis. That's a donation, just a one-off casual almost spontaneous impulse decision. But it might be that what you would really like is for somebody to commit on a monthly standing order to you of £5 or £10 or whatever it might be. And the great thing about recurrent contributions, it enables you to plan ahead, knowing what money is coming in. And again, it also builds in commitment from the person making the donation, and it gives you the means as well of communicating with them, because you will have basic information about them and you will be able to send them regular updates about what the investment they've made in you is actually doing in terms of impact. And if they can see an impact taking place, they're far more likely to want to not only continue contributions, but potentially increase them, or certainly recommend what you do to somebody else who might also make a contribution. And remember, word of mouth is one of the cheapest and most effective forms of any marketing. So if somebody recommends what you do and says to somebody else, why don't you do that as well? And they think, oh yeah, we will do that. If so-and-so thinks it's okay, then we do. That is a really, really useful and sustainable mechanism to get involved with. What you've got to think about with donations as well is what processes you actually need to collect these things. It's one thing to get money, it's another to know how to process it. So if you're just collecting spontaneous impulse things, you will need buckets or tins or whatever that are secure, that carry your brand, so they're not being misused by other things. You need to make sure all of those things are set up. And equally, if you go to the other extreme of regular direct debits, you need to make sure that you've got a bank account, that you can give people the sort code and the account name and the account number in order that they can actually put their direct debit into it. So again, all of these things, not difficult to do in themselves, but they need planning. They don't happen by accident. When you're collecting donations from people, if you can get them to voluntarily give you simple contact details, I don't think nowadays you need to go into too much detail. You probably need a mobile phone number or an email address, and that will enable you to keep in contact with these people if they want to. But always be mindful here of the new data compliance laws. The storing people's personal information is a highly regulated thing now, and if you get it wrong, you can be fined, or certainly it will tarnish your brand if people think you're doing something in a way you shouldn't do it. So make sure that you're aware of the general data protection regulations and have processes to make sure they're put into place. I've already mentioned the importance of regular communications with donors. You also need to make sure to assure your donors that money is being well used and not abused. You need transparent and audited accounts that can be seen by everyone. You need to monitor carefully what donations are coming in for obvious reasons, and also transparency and honesty is a very important part of this. So don't just think that giving the money is the end of the journey. It's actually the beginning of, hopefully, a journey that will be continuing to both you and the donors benefit. So the second source of income is through events. And again, what is an event? Well, this one's more straightforward. An event is usually a physical thing. It's a fete or a car boot sale or a cake or a bakery sale or even a show. I guess it could now be an online event of some sort as well. It could be a little conference online. Certainly since COVID, we've learned to be a lot more inventive with online events, and they're quite easy to do, and they're very good at engaging with people who are short of time as well. So just think through what events you might want to run and make sure that you get the timing of those events at the right time. There's not much point in having outdoor fetes in the UK in October and November because they're likely to be dark, cold and wet. Fetes are for the summer, same really with car boot sales, and of course it may be, coming back to the online, that you have the physical events in the good months and you can run online events to keep the momentum going in the more difficult months. Ask yourself, is it going to be ticketed or is it going to be pay on the day or both? The big advantage of having ticketed events is that even if the weather is poor, you've actually received the money in advance, and at the very least that will help your cash flow. If it's pay on the day and the weather's bad and nobody turns up, it may still be that you've had to hire a hall, you've had costs associated, and you've got no income to cover those costs, so you end up running at a loss. It may also be, of course, that you run both, that you offer both a ticketed and a pay on the day event. One of the things you can do to incentivise early payment is to offer cheaper prices or 2-for-1s or entry into special raffles, anything that encourages and incentivises people to pay in advance rather than on the day. That not only has the benefit of you getting the cash up front, but it also means you don't have the cost of managing large amounts of cash after the event. Keeping a lot of cash around now is obviously highly insecure, and security costs money. So if you can avoid cash transactions, there's much to be said for that. Ask yourself a really simple question: how will an event generate income? And if you take a car boot sale or a fete, for example, clearly you're going to be selling stalls. The stalls themselves will sell products, possibly services as well. That you may have a raffle running on the day, you may charge entrance fees, there may be parking fees, you may be selling refreshments and or collecting donations at the same time. So even in the case of an event, there could well be many different ways of raising money going on simultaneously. I've mentioned already about cash security. Don't leave that to chance. If you are having cash changing hands, make sure that you've got security in place, and that can take many shapes and forms as well. There's the security at the moment that the cash is collected, and then there's the security later on when you aggregate all the different sources of cash so it becomes one large source of cash. And if it really is a very large amount of money, you may actually need to organise professional collection of that cash so that it finds its way to a bank safely without problem en route. And I ought to add there as well, always be aware, and hopefully it won't be the case, but pilfering does take place. You're probably carefully selecting people to be involved with you that makes that less of a risk. But just be aware that not everyone is as scrupulous as you perhaps are, and just make sure that you've thought through ways of mitigating that particular risk. Ask yourself, and I mentioned earlier on about direct costs related to the event, are you incurring specific costs because you're running an event, such as venue hire, promotional costs and so on? And if you are, you need to make sure that you've got that factored in to your accounts for that particular event. And if you're going to make sure that you do make a profit, make sure that you obviously manage your costs as tightly as possible, keep them as small as possible, and maximise your income at the same time. And in that way, you'll generate more money for your cause, for your social enterprise, than if you don't manage it properly. And are you looking for more than just money from an event as well? And this is a question to ask yourself, I think, throughout this, because obviously receiving money is critical to running a successful social enterprise, but also you're going to need manpower through volunteers, expertise, people influencing and encouraging others through word of mouth to be involved with you, brand building activities and other promotional activities, perhaps promoting events that are coming in the future. So when you're running these events, make sure that you capitalise on all the opportunities, not just the financial ones, but also the non-financial ones that in social enterprises especially are so critical to making them run well and efficiently. So the next aspect of income generation is through sales, and most of you will know what sales are. Sales basically is where you are selling tangible goods or services to people, they pay for them, and a transaction takes place, they take away something and you get some cash in return. But it might also be that you're indirectly selling your concept, your idea and your brand. So beneath the sales itself is the downstream selling of what you're doing, which hopefully in the future will result in tangible sales. So always bear in mind, getting the money in is important, but at the same time, you can often very successfully promote your brand and other things that you need at the same time. You might also be selling to volunteers why they ought to give their time and energy to supporting you. That won't just happen. You have to persuade them that they really would be useful and enjoy what they're doing and indeed make a difference, because most volunteers who are involved in social enterprises are not there to make money, they're there to make a difference. And that again is what I think differentiates a social enterprise from a commercial enterprise. You're always going to be the primary salesperson, and I know that you've probably by now done the pitching unit of work, where you need to sell exactly to the right person what your social enterprise is about and why other people ought to be involved with you. So you need to make sure that you've got that pitch for selling sorted out. And furthermore, if other people are working with you, make sure they too know what that elevator pitch is. Make sure that they've got the sales pitch so that they can sell things as effectively as you. But it's you that's going to be leading this, and it's you that's got to make sure that other social entrepreneurs and other volunteers are properly trained to actually do the sales aspect as well as you need them to. Again, if you're selling things, if you're selling tangible projects, you need to make sure that the stuff that you're selling is properly sourced, ethically sourced. You don't want stuff being made by slave labour, or you don't want products, coffee, cocoa, whatever, that are coming from places where those farming it are being ripped off. So make sure that you're very careful in how you source your products, and also, of course, make sure that when you're actually selling them on the day, that you're selling things legally, compliantly, particularly where food sales are taking place, because there's so many food and health and hygiene regulations, but also with things like soft toys, where you need soft toys that are made in a way that's safe for children playing with them. You don't want sharp things within, and you don't want flammable filling, for example, in them. It's for you to make sure that all of these things are right, and if you get it wrong, then it's going to be problematic, not just legally, but also in terms of your brand and reputation and future success. And make sure that your sales plan is fully integrated with your operational plan, which again I know you've dealt with in previous unit of work. But for example, if you're selling ice cream, you better make sure that you've got the right freezers and fridges there on the day in order to dispense those ice creams, because otherwise operationally you won't be able to deliver what you want. Silly little thing, but if you need fridges, you also need electricity. So make sure you've got enough extension leads, power sockets, and all the things that you need in order that a fridge can run. I know it sounds obvious, but it's very easy to overlook. And how many people go to venues where there is a plug, but there aren't enough of them? So you need extension leads, and suddenly you find you haven't got one in the boot of your car, and you really wish you had. So planning down to that level of detail is very important in order to make an event a success. The next strand is gifts. What is a gift? Well, a gift is usually a one-off event, not always. It's not that dissimilar to a donation, but it's something that somebody gives you in order to support your social enterprise. And that gift, of course, it might be a raffle prize. It might be some money. It could take on a whole host of commodities that all add value to the thing that you're doing. So again, just think through with gifts. If they're going to be made, I suspect that it's quite a good idea to make a list of what you would like as a gift. So if you think of a wedding list, for example, where brides and grooms traditionally sort of have a list of the things that they would find useful, if you're going to receive gifts, it's quite a good idea to give people an idea of what is useful to you, because most people, if they want to give, would like to give something useful. Gifts can take the form of money, which is always very useful, goods, time, expertise, and advice. Advice is a very valuable gift, particularly, for example, legal advice, where to gain that advice would cost a lot of money. But if a lawyer or a solicitor is prepared to give you pro bono free advice, then that is something that is really, really valuable to you, and take it with open arms. It's very hard to plan and budget around gifts, and this is one of the issues here. So I do think you should regard them as the cherry on the cake. They shouldn't be regarded as core income, but rather bonuses and something that adds to the base income you need to run your social enterprise. And again, if you prioritise income streams, so you've got the nice to have and the need to have, and you're aware of the difference, you will set up different strategies to cope with both. Grants. Well, what is a grant? Well, grants again tend to be one-off payments, often with pre-agreed use. So often with a grant, you will apply, a call will come up where money can be bid for, and you have to make an application through a bid, usually a formal document nowadays, where you make a case why somebody should give you a one-off grant. And it could be from a European fund, it could be from a local council, it might be from a foundation or some other charitable trust that's interested in your area of work. I think that one of the most useful use of grants is where you need capital acquisitions. So it might help you to buy a laptop, or it might help you to buy a fridge, for example, that you need in order to keep food fresh at events. It might help you to buy a trailer that enables you to get commodities to and from events. All of those sort of things that add value but are one-off items that you need that can then be used recurrently often. I've mentioned already they can be made by councils, foundations or trusts. And one of the things that you as the social enterprise entrepreneur needs to do is to do your research to identify who might be prepared or have grants that will be useful to you. And this isn't a one-off activity because it changes all the time. So constantly keep looking at opportunities to bid for money that people want to give in order to support these sorts of things. And a really good example at the moment relates to food banks. Some supermarkets now will make grants in the form of food or indeed in the form of money to support food banks that are helping those that are less fortunate. Again, with grants, don't see them as a source of long-term income. They tend not to be revenue. Sometimes grants have an aspect of revenue funding alongside capital funding, but it's also time limited. And one of my big criticisms of many social enterprises is that they win a successful grant, a bit of capital and a bit of revenue, and then they take their eye off what this particular module is about, where the income's coming from. They become dependent on the income that's given to them rather than looking at different ways and means of generating ongoing income streams. So I think it's really important for you to get grants where you can, but to see them as a bonus and to build them into your income mix, but don't let them become the majority if you can avoid it. Okay, so again, the final point there is that many social enterprises become over-dependent, and that if the money's withdrawn for whatever reason, in hard times usually, that means that your social enterprise fails, and that in turn means that those that you're wanting to support, perhaps in their hour of greatest need, also fails. So it's really, really important from the user's point of view of your social enterprise, the beneficiary's point of view, that you really do create income streams that are long-term successful. Sponsorship. What is sponsorship? Well, that's normally support given by a person, another company, a friend or another body, because they want to help and support you. It can take many forms. It might be pounds, euros. It could be free promotion. It could be other help and support. They may be able to provide you with goods to sell. They may be able to provide you with cash machines. They may be able to provide you with the stalls themselves from which to sell things from. They might be able to give you a marquee, for example. So there's lots of different ways that sponsors can help, and this is a something for something. And rather than offering sponsors nothing back, always try to give a sponsor something in return. It's what I call a something for something deal. They give you the sponsorship and you give them sometimes PR, or when you're running a raffle, you can actually allow them to sponsor the raffle and to say a few words about their own company at the same time. Take a bit of care with it. You don't want somebody sponsoring you whose mission is totally out of line with your own. Any sponsors need to be sympathetic to the line that you're in, but I'm assuming most of you will have done that, and then you want them to sponsor you again in the future. Give them something back in return. The final one I want to look at is crowdfunding. This is relatively new, and crowdfunding is literally what it says on the tin. Crowdfunding is where you get relatively small amounts of money from individuals, which when aggregated together become a large amount of money. So you might have a web-based platform where people donate you £5 into the crowdfunding stream, and if 10,000 people do that, suddenly you've got a large amount of income. The thing about crowdfunding, though, they tend to be professional investment vehicles, and people involved in crowdfunding often want something back. Again, like sponsorship, it's a something for something deal. They want a return on their investment. Now, it may be that return is a financial return, that as a result of your social enterprise, you promise to repay them, 2 or 3%, which is obviously higher than the base rate of interest, and therefore it would be an interesting thing for somebody with spare money to use. But there are other ways of giving returns on investment as well, and there's no one set model. So here's a few of the things to think about. Basically, to set up a crowdfunding system, you need to use an online platform, and there are many of them. And that online platform will set up all the mechanisms for people donating or for giving money through the crowdfunding system. All the legal stuff will be set up behind it, and they're professionally organised platforms for collection of money. In a way, they're a bit like mini banks. Sometimes you will make a financial return for people, but sometimes as well you might offer them something in return. So part of it might be you don't give them money back in return for what they invest in you. You might say you can come to an event free, or it may be you can offer them free advertising on your promotional materials. It may be you offer them a slot to present something at one of the events you're doing. Or it may be that you can offer them vouchers in something. It could be, for example, that another company has given you some vouchers to use, and you can pass those vouchers back to those who are donating or not donating, are giving through the crowdfunding system. I think crowdfunding is quite a useful mechanism for more mature social enterprise, but I don't think it's one that you will want to think about in the early days. With one possible exception, and that is informal crowdfunding through friends and family, where they perhaps give you a small amount of money, they don't expect anything back, but it is slightly more contractual and formalised than literally just putting money in a tin. One of the challenges of crowdfunding is there are many platforms to choose from, and if you're going to go down this route, you need advice, research and support in choosing the right platform. I'd just say here that crowdfunding is a highly unregulated industry and there are many sharks in the pond. There are also some very, very good platforms, but finding them and choosing the right one is quite a skillful thing to do. So if you can find somebody with experience and expertise in crowdfunding, if you're going down that route, then you do it with expert help. Don't try to do it just yourself, because you will fall into problems that you hadn't anticipated because you've never seen them before. So finally, and in summary, the point I made at the beginning and the point I'm going to reiterate now is it's really important to plan and manage your income streams and align them to costs in both quantity and timeline. All of this needs careful thought and planning. It doesn't just happen by accident. You'll probably need to use some spreadsheets or some other software to help you. And if you've got friends who are expert on accounts and managing money, then their efforts and experience will be very valuable to you. It's also likely that you're going to be managing multiple income streams, and therefore you've got to have multiple ways of managing those income streams. But I absolutely applaud you trying to have lots of different ways of raising money, not only because it will give you more money, but because it will spread the risk should one of those income streams cease to be. So I don't think a lot of you will find sales an easy thing to do. Most of you are running social enterprises because you want to make a difference in a particular cause that you've identified needs the activity that you're proposing to do. But really, you must develop your sales skills and your sales awareness if you're going to create a successful and, importantly, sustainable social enterprise. And money raising skills are, I think, becoming one of the most important skills of successful social entrepreneurs.